Hello and welcome to this, the first in a new series of videos with the intention of helping you set up your RMS camera systems. If you're joining me now, you've either just purchased or you have the stuff in your home and you're waiting to set it up, or you're just thinking about potentially having an RMS camera. Either way, I hope that this next set of videos goes some way to show you how the hardware is set up, the hints and tricks that we've picked up over the years of running these systems and installing these systems, take away some of the myths, some of the misinformation that may be old hat now, and do an up-to-date video to hopefully walk you through the system so that should you wish to purchase one of these systems, or you, as I say, you already have one, then you can follow these videos hopefully in a step-by-step manner if I do it correctly, and you can walk through and get your system on the wall and reporting data to the Global Meteor Network. So that's the intention. Whether we'll get there, we shall see. If you have any suggestions after watching any of these videos, anything that we've missed, anything we could do better, or if you think we've done well and you just wish to say so, then your comments will be welcomed. If you wish to like and subscribe, then please do so. It's not something you have to do, but we'd like it if you did. So we'll get on now and we'll see how much we can help you. So if you've intentionally come here after doing a little bit of research on the RMS cameras, or if you've just happened upon this video by accident, well, welcome, however you've got here. Just give you a quick overview of the RMS system. Well, RMS stands for Raspberry Pi Meteor System, and this is the Raspberry Pis that many of you probably already know, the little mini PCs. Nice and small, relatively cheap, and they run all of the software and do all the things that we need to do. Because they're relatively inexpensive, it makes this project much more affordable for many amateurs, which is the idea, is to get as many people involved as we can. We have hundreds here in the UK, and there's hundreds, maybe thousands around the world, all with these systems. So RMS, if you hear it, you know it's the Raspberry Pi Meteor System. Now, the old way of doing meteor detection with videos, certainly 10 years ago, was using old analog cameras that were reasonably sensitive, but the software and so forth let them down. The software wasn't updated, and in the end it wasn't really doing what we required of it. So I think it started at the Croatian Meteor Network. They came up with some system that would run on a Raspberry Pi. That was taken on board by the Global Meteor Network, which is based in Canada. And what happens now is, if you have one of these systems, you get all the data on your Raspberry Pi at the end of the evening, all there for you to look at and do with what you will, but it also sends all of the data to the Global Meteor Network servers. There, all of the interesting scientific work is done. You know, as much as we can see these pretty pictures, they're more than pretty pictures and videos. You're actually contributing to real citizen science. This science is then being sent to the university in Canada of Western Ontario, and you never know, one day your camera may be famous. Who knows? But that's a very small overview. There's lots of reading online if you wish to see more about it, the globalmeteornetwork.org and various other places. Now I've given you a very basic overview. Let's get in and see what you need before you can start assembling. So we'll start with one of the most important parts of the equipment, that is the camera and lens. Now, lots of cameras and lenses have been tested, very few have made the grade. So at the moment, at the time of making this video, and it has been the same for the last few years, we are using the Sony IMX291 camera board. As you can see down here, that it's from AliExpress that we tend to get them. These camera boards work absolutely fine, fortunately, and you also have to be quite specific about the lens. If you get the wrong type of lens, you won't necessarily get the data of good enough quality to be included in the science. So if you can see on this picture here, we've got the f/0.95 Starlight lens. With this supply, which is where I get all mine, they already fit the lens to the camera board, just as you can see in that picture there. Now these cameras work with PoE, which is power over Ethernet. That's the standard setup. So if you're going to purchase it like this, as you can see, I've already highlighted the 48 volt PoE cable because I wish to have one of those with it. And the lens here you can see there's two different sizes. There's a 4mm and a 6mm. Now the 4mm will give you the widest view, which generally if you've got a nice big patch of sky, that's what you go for. If you've got lots of light pollution, or if you've got lots of obstructions, you might find out that maybe a third of what you're looking at is a wall or a tree or something. So what you may wish to do is to shrink down the field of view. Now the way to do that is you would then opt for the 6mm lens. Ordinarily most people go for the 4, but there are 6mm lenses in use and they give just as good data. You just have a smaller patch of sky that to detect the meteors from. So this is a supply that I've used for all of the cameras that I've done. As I say, it already comes assembled, as you can see in the photograph, and they give you very good service. It takes 2, 3, sometimes 4 weeks to come from China. You just have to factor that in. But just make sure that it is this type of camera board and this lens. They're nice. You'll see the quite fat lens. There are others where the lens is weird shapes and things. Don't go near it. So you want the camera with the 48-volt PoE cable and the 4mm or the 6mm lens. So that's the camera. What we'll look at next is the housing. And the recommended housing is this one here. It's a 6-inch long. It's only a small thing. It comes with the bracket and it comes with not much else. It's got a plastic carrier for a camera, but we don't use that. Now when you're buying this is, I've got it obviously in pounds, British pounds, wherever you get it from, it'll be in whatever your currency is. Again, this is the same buyer. I've bought all of mine and I've bought 110, 115 now, something like that. Again, very good service. Usually these will ship them out within 1 to 2 days of ordering, providing it's not the weekend. Now, again, what you need to do this is make sure you choose the correct selection out of all these. Default DG30, DG40. DG means double glass. And what they tend to do is they'll have a ring inside on the glass, which we don't really want. So what I always choose is the plate and bracket. And what that means is the glass is just a single clear glass all the way. And you also, with the plate and bracket, you are provided with the plate and the mounting bracket for the camera. So when you come here, make sure you choose plate and bracket. And that comes with the plate and bracket internally, but also the wall bracket to screw the housing to the wall. Few other things that you may need. Now this may be an awkward one, is they don't give you a screw to screw these two bits together. Don't know why, but they don't. So what you need is an M3 screw. Now I buy these in packs of 50, and these are a good little M3 screws because they're not too long and they come with a washer already set up, so it just helps to hold it nice and tight. Unless you've got someone that's got one, you may have to buy a bag of 50 or 100, whatever they come. I think they're 50s. I buy mine from Amazon, but any M3 screw and with a bit of a washer on helps just to do that. A few other bits that you may need. You'll need some insulation tape, preferably black, because you need to mask off one of the cables. To screw the camera to the bracket, you use these pins, which are like riser pins. Not sure you can see that very clearly. And I've got an M3 socket, which I've got on a little handle, which allows me to easily fit. That goes in there, and then I can screw that into the camera nice and quickly. You don't need that. You can use pliers, you can use whatever, as long as you can just nip it up quite tight. And of course, what you also need is a Raspberry Pi. This is Pi 5, but at the moment we're using Pi 4s. So Raspberry Pi. Pi 4s you really require now. Pi 3s generally just don't cut. So you need a Pi 4. Now the 2 GB Pi 4 is more than adequate. You do not need to buy the 4 GB or the 8 GB. So 2 GB Raspberry Pi 4, and of course you'll need a micro SD card. The micro SD cards that I use tend to be Samsung's. They work very well. I'll put a link at the bottom when I finished this video, so you can see which ones I use. If you buy cheap cards of poor quality, they either don't work at all or they work for a bit and then fail just when you don't want them to. That's generally all the parts that you need. No doubt if you've already ordered your bits, you've already got them on the way or in your hands now. There's possibly a few things I may have missed out. If so, I shall put them in the comments below. So that is all of the hardware. The 48-volt PoE cable that comes with the camera looks like that. It's got 3 ends. and the camera housing looks like that. So you can see they're all quite small little things, and the housing is that big. Again, nothing too large, so it doesn't get seen for too far away when it's on the side of your house. So that's a quick look at the hardware. What we'll do next is we'll look at how you get the camera ready and attach it to the brackets and then fit it into the housings. So we'll look at that next. Now for this part, let's look at what we need, what we've got together. So we need the camera module with the lens attached. We need a Phillips screwdriver. I've got my 3mm socket. You can use pliers. We need 4 of the little risers that should come with the camera. We need the bracket and plate and the M3 screw that I showed you earlier. So with all those parts together, what we first need to do is to disassemble the camera. Don't panic, just take your time. Try and do it in quite a clean environment so there's no dust around. And what we need to do is to remove the IR filter behind the lens, because that's in place with these. So what we need to do first is take the rear circuit board off. Now be careful, as you can see there's a ribbon attached from the camera board that goes to the back. So what we do is, if you look at it that way up, you'll see there's a little clip here. I just pull that very gently, don't break it off. It's not the end of the world if you break it off, but it just makes things easier. And you just get it started and the board will pop off just like that. So there's the ribbon, so just be mindful of that. As long as you don't put any tug on it too much, it should stay attached. What we need to do is to remove these 2 screws here. Now all the time I'm doing this, I'm leaving the dust cap on the lens and leave that on until it's actually just about to go into the camera housing, because it saves me touching it with my thumb and finger, getting oils on there or dust. But if you can do this in a relatively dust-free environment, then no dust is going to go onto the camera. Now if you've bought the camera board and the lens separately, you may already have the lens without the IR filter on it. And the camera just has a little sticker, so you peel the sticker off and screw it on. But for this one, I'm showing you what I do. These 2 screws need to be removed, hence the Phillips screwdriver. So holding the camera, the lens housing quite tight, we need to remove these 2 screws. They sometimes are quite tight to start with. And do this somewhere where if the screw flies off, you can find it. If you do it with a big carpet around you and the screw goes in there, you may never find it again. Now I'm doing this on this white card for 2 reasons. One, to help you to see a little against the black background of my work surface, but also you need it when you come to do the remove the lens. Now there you can see I've got the screws out, and that is the camera chip. Do not touch it with your fingers. Do not leave it exposed for too long, and keep it away from dust and so on. So I'm setting that aside, keeping it out of the way so I don't rub my sleeve over it or anything that may have dust on it. There's the 2 screws, which I'm just going to move off the paper, or will become apparent. Now what we do is we have to unscrew the lens out of the lens holder. There's a lot of thread on these lenses. We put that to one side. Again, try not to get any dust on the top of that. So there's the front. Try not to touch the back of that. And inside this holder, you'll see there's that slight green tinge. It's not very focused there for you, but you can see that there's that thin bit of glass. Now this is where this white piece of paper comes into its own. I put it down like that. I take something that will fit through the hole and I push it. And this is very fine glass. Doesn't take too much to break, but it will cut you if you are rough with it. So firstly just get most of the bits off, then turn it the other way and make sure that all of the loose bits are gone. There's a bit still hanging over there. So now I can see. You won't be able to see very clearly, I don't think, maybe. All of the glass has now been removed and I can see where the glass is. Now you imagine that on this black surface. That's why I use a white piece of paper. So I'm just going to dispose of this in the bin behind me before it gets anywhere. And again, I'll put that card back just to help you to see what I'm doing. So what we need to do as quickly as we can, just to prevent any dust ingress, is to screw the lens back into the lens holder. And if you get it with about 2 or 3 turns left where the step is, again, I'm not sure this camera's showing you, it gets you a start. You're somewhere near focused, but you will do the proper focusing later. And on the lens hole, you see there's 2 holes here, 2 bosses. They will screw in. Go back on there, and the screws will fit in there. So it can be a bit tricky to get them going at first. You end up being all fingers and thumbs. So I'll try to do this and look like I know what I'm doing. So we'll just start that screw in. Make sure it's sticking in the boss. Just get it just started, and then we'll get the other boss lined up on the other side, and we'll get that other screw in. I don't think that first screw went in very straight, so I may have to just redo that one. And before I tighten that up too much, I've put this screw in on a slight angle, so I just need to remove him and redo it again. It's important to get the lens assembly to sit nice and flat as it was before you disassembled it, because if the lens is not flat, then your images will have some strange out of focus areas, and you'll be told of this when you supply your data for approval. They tend to say, oh, part of your image is out of focus. Now that can only happen if you've either got something on one side of the lens, maybe a big thumbprint, or more often than not, the lens assembly has not been screwed back onto the camera. So hopefully now, and I just check that there's no movement and that everything's okay, and I'm clipping that back to where it was. All looks okay. Now, as a final check, this camera board here, again, it's not too clear on there. It's held in with 2 solid clips here and 2, this round clip here. There's one there and one there, and I just make sure that I haven't loosened that by the work I've been doing on it. Make sure that everything's nice and firm and there's no movement. So that's it. That's the camera board with the IR filter now removed. The next thing we need to do with that is to fit it to the camera bracket. Now you must make sure you put this the right way, otherwise the meteors will be flying upwards, and you don't want meteors flying upwards, they should be flying downwards. So if you look on the back here, you've got 3 sides with connectors. 2 there, 2 there, and sort of 2 here. And you want these are the 2 that we use, and they should be at the bottom. If you do it correctly, then the little man, there's a little man up here, and the writing should be upside down, and the ribbon should be at the bottom. So hold your housing like that, offer it up there, and that's how it goes through. Again with the ribbon at the bottom. So now what we do is we take these up stands, these little brass screws, and you push them through the circuit board and through the black plastic. They sometimes can be a bit of a pain to just get them in. There's one in, and what I tend to do, I push all these in first. You can just use 2 of these if you like, you know, it's not really going to go anywhere, but if you have 4 of these as they've supplied, then use all 4. Okay, so those risers are all in place, and make sure I do it the right way up again. Quick check, ribbon at the bottom. Now you can use your fingers to get it going and then pliers to tighten it up, but when you've done 100 cameras or more, if you've got a 3mm socket, it makes it so much easier. Putting in 2 opposite ones first, opposite corners, and you'll always find there's one that never really wants to go in the hole. They do eventually, but they take a little bit of persuasion. You just have to slacken off the other 2 a little bit, maybe just wiggle it around a bit, and there we go. So you see that 4th one's just coming through the hole. This is supposed to be a high def webcam. It's not looking high def at the moment. That's the 4th one. So now they're all in, I'm just going to give them a nice tighten. You know, it's going to get warm, cold over the years, so you don't want these through thermal expansion and contraction starting to become slack. They shouldn't do, but again, one of those things, better safe than sorry. So now we've got the camera affixed to the camera bracket. What we need to do next is affix it to the plate. Now you see on the plate it's got 3 holes and 2 slots, and on the bottom of this thing here you've got those lumps sticking out. They sit in there and they allow it to keep it sort of facing forward. It won't turn too much. Now what I tend to do is I'll use the middle hole and keep this right at the front, so there's plenty of space. If you put it back here, that's going to be right at the front of the housing. So I just put it there so that there's plenty of space around here for focusing when you come to do it. The screw I have, the M3 screw with the washer that's retained, place that on. I said the middle screw of those 3 in the centre. Normally just goes straight in. Of course, doing a video, this screw doesn't want to go in. So I'll just nip it up, and before I get it tight, what I'm going to do is just to make sure, if you see there, you can see it's not straight, so just straighten it up and then hold it tight again and tighten it, just tweak it again. I think I can just about move it a bit. There we go. So that is now the camera affixed to the bracket, affixed to the plate. Now what you don't want to do is to leave it straight, because once you're in the housing, the sunshade will be seen by the camera. They're quite wide field of view. So once it's all screwed together, I put my fingers there, thumbs there, and I just bend it. Don't need to bend it a lot. See how much bend I've put in that? That's probably all that you need, and that just allows you to have a full field of view. If you leave it straight, sometimes you'll lose the corners because of the sun shield of the housing. See, the screw sticks out a little bit at the bottom, but that doesn't matter. So that is the camera plate and bracket assembly done, and we've removed the IR filter. And finally what we'll do is we will affix the cable. So this was the cable I mentioned previously, the PoE, or Power over Ethernet, and it's got 3 ends there. It's got a larger connector with 2 wires in it. That is not used, so just ignore that one. There's a 4-way connector with 2 wires in, that's for the power, and this one is a 6-way connector with 5 wires in it, and that is for the data. But what we need to do is, on here there's LEDs. Now those LEDs flash. This is going to be inside the housing. The last thing we need is a load of flashing lights in the housing, because all that's going to do is to give you loads of false detections. So we need to cover those up. That is where the black insulation electrician's tape comes in. So I'll just get some scissors. Try not to cut your fingers off doing any of this. It's all done at your risk, not mine. So we get some black tape and we start it there, and I always put more on than I need, but again, once it's done, you're not going to have to go back up on the ladder and put more tape on. So I'm just wrapping tape around the end. It's nothing too exciting to see. And I always cut it with scissors for something like this, because then you get a nice clean end, you get no scraggly bits, no chance of it starting to peel off. So you need to cover that area completely. I think it's more the top off, but I do the whole body of it. Don't go over here, because that's where the other end of the connection goes. So once you've done that, this in the default setup is not used, so we just plop that cap in, and then we take these cables and they plug into the bottom. So the one with the red and black, the 4-way, that goes in. Now it goes in that way with the you not particularly see it, but I can see the silver bits of the connector. They'll only go in one way, but be quite gentle with them. Don't be too rough. You don't want to start breaking these and have to order another cable. So that's the blue and the red and black power cable. This is the 5-port, 5-cabled one. Push it in again. Be careful, don't push like that and snap the cables with your thumb. I tend to try and make sure you're grabbing the connection itself. Push it in. Now once it's in, I had a failure this week of a camera that I sent out because the blue wire had pulled itself out. Fortunately, the operator, he has 3 cameras, he had a look and saw the fault and just pushed it back in. But if you're doing this one, just to make sure that their connections are in and all the cables are fully in. At this point, that's all you need to do for the hardware side of the camera. So we can set that to one side. And then the next thing we need to look at is the housing. So I'll get the bits ready and then we'll start with that. So now we'll look at getting the camera assembly into the camera housing. So for this step, we need the camera housing, obviously. And in the box with that, you get 4 self-tapping screws. And you get 2 larger bolts like this. So there's the bolts. You get 4 of those little self-tappers. And you get 2 cable glands. And the housing with a cheap plastic plate in there. Now we don't want to use that plate. It's not really useful. So the first thing we need to do is to remove the plate. There's only 1 screw holding it. Now if you keep hold of that, it means you've got a spare. So should you drop one during this build or at any time afterwards. So this here is just a plastic plate. No real use to anyone. Throw it in the bin unless you can find some other project for it. So the way that it works is these 2 rails here are just the right distance apart to accommodate a self-tapping screw. So if I turn it this way now, hopefully you can still see as I do this. We've got the 4 self-tappers. This is the point where I remove the cap from the lens and not before, for obvious reasons. So I'll just see a few specks on the glass there. I'll just remove those. So what I do is, if you can see here on this screw, you can see that's within that channel. Little channel there runs down and runs through where those 2 screws, and similarly on this side. So the first thing you need to do is move it all the way to the front so that the lens is touching the glass, and then bring it back no more than say about 4 or 5 millimeters maximum. The closer it is to the glass, the less aberrations and also the wider field of view and the less chance of the sun shield and so on getting in the way. So once that's in place, we'll take a self-tapper and we'll stick it in through the plate. Now what I tend to do is I'll put 1 screw in almost tight, and then I'll put another screw in on the same side. And the reason for that is if I put one in here now and it's not straight, it's going to struggle to straighten up. It's not going to want to do that. Whereas if I put one in here, it's going to get that assembly, if it's slightly twisted, to turn. So I'll pop that screw in. I'm sure there's several of you now looking at this thinking, why is he showing us how to do this? Surely this is simple. Well, yes it is, but I did tell you it's going to be step by step, and you're quite entitled, if you like, to jump to the next steps, or you may never know, I might suddenly tell you something you weren't aware of. I doubt that, but who knows. So this is the 4th screw. So if we now look, we've got the 4 screws holding the camera plate, and the camera's in there nice and securely. We've cabled it up, and then what we need to do for now is we just take this cable, which you can't really see what I'm doing, and I just roll it around, coil it around until I can get it all to fit in the housing. There you go. It's all just in there, out of the way, and then we close the housing up for now. Get ready for the click. So there you can see the housing. And the camera looks like it's a little sad. It's pointing very slightly downwards. Not that you can really see on this angle. But that's what you want. Otherwise it will see this. Now importantly with this, because this is not pointing downwards like a normal security camera, it's pointing up. What you need to do, let me work it around there, is where these screws are and all around the edge of the glass is you need some sealant, some silicone sealant like they use in the bathroom, or try and get some external stuff or bathroom stuff, don't just use a standard, and fill these holes in to protect the screws, and just put a little bead all around there. Try not to smear it too much so that it doesn't get in the field of view, and that should hopefully protect this housing for years. We've had many of these up for several years and we've not had any real concerns with water ingress. Remember, they're going to be about 40-45 degrees sticking up, so you'll get a little bit of water sat in here, so if you put sealant all the way around, it should hopefully prevent any water ingress. So that's the camera in, that's the front looked after. Now you will need to pass a Ethernet cable through one of these two holes, and you use these two glands. So what you tend to do is to use the small one for your Ethernet cable, and the larger one we don't use. So what we do is, I tend to use a little bit of the bubble wrap that the cameras come wrapped in, and I'll just roll a small bit up and stick it in there, and then when I tighten that up, it will close up, and that's mainly to prevent spiders. We're not too worried about making it perfectly watertight, because should any water get in, the last thing you want is to fill up the housing. So if these are not perfectly watertight, it's okay. But you don't want spiders getting in there, because otherwise you will see strange things from space. So you unscrew that, you stick that through, and then you put that nut from the inside on there. Now if you have the tools and the connectors to make up your own Ethernet cables, then you can use this gland, stick the cable through there and tighten it up as normal. However, if you don't have that, I have another video which should be on my page that talks about the camera connectors, and what I do there is I designed a high-tech bit of equipment which is a little plastic thing for the cable. Now what would happen with this, if you were to use this, is the small gland you're now going to fill with a bit of bubble wrap or something and tighten that just to seal that hole, and then you would use one of these in this hole. You may need to trim that hole slightly to let it fit. Now when I've supplied to the UK cameras in the past, I've supplied one of these whether they wanted it or not, and I think some people have used them, which is great. I've used them on my cameras and the cameras I've physically fitted for a few people close to me. Now if you have your own 3D printer, I will put links to this in the description below, so you're quite happy to download the files and print your own, and it comes in 3 parts. 2 parts are the same and the ring is the 3rd part, so you need to print 2 of those and 1 of those. Some people call it clever, some people call it simple, but it gets you around if you don't have the kit to be able to terminate your own Ethernet connections. I say there's a video on that, so I won't go into that one now. So finally we've got all that ready to go. The only other thing I will mention is this is the bracket that screws on here like that. That's what these 2 larger screws are for. There you go. So what I tend to do is I remove this screw, this head comes off, and I affix this to there whilst I'm on the ground. Do it now nice and solid. Then I put that on the wall, fix that to the wall wherever it's going. Once that's fixed on, the camera with this sat on top, I just drop on the top, and at the last minute I fit the screw in there. If you try and do it with this all together, you'll have no end of problems, or you drop the screw and so on. So that's my tip here, is to fix that to here first, and then only once you're up the ladder and the main bracket here is affixed to the wall, do you then try to marry the 2 together, because then it's just drop it in and place one screw in there to lock it. That screw allows this whole camera system to rotate, so it will turn wherever you need it to, and you can angle it up and down. So that is all the hardware you require for the camera lens, the camera housing and the wall bracket. That if you've ordered the correct parts, that should be all that you have there. So apart from the Raspberry Pi hardware and the cabling, that is all the hardware that we need to look at now. So as we've now configured the main part of the hardware, what we'll look at next is how we set up and program the camera. The cameras are ordinarily set up for CCTV, security type operations, and we of course want them to do meteor detection, so they have to have specific settings put in there. They also have to be set in a particular way so that they talk to the Raspberry Pi with the correct IP. So that'll be the start of the next video. Thank you for now.